Welcome to my YouTube channel, African Biodiversity. I'm Valence, a research scientist with a specialization in fisheries and wildlife conservation. Africa is a home to the world's largest wildlife with evergreen vegetation and the richest continent in terms of freshwater ecosystem. So these unique characters of Africa have enabled the success of multiple species, both on land and in water. When we talk about biodiversity, we mean a variety of all living organisms, their genes, and ecosystems in which they live. Biodiversity can be subdivided into three major levels, whereby we have genetic biodiversity, which looks at how genes differ among different species. Then we have species diversity, which looks at how different species do survive in a particular habitat. Then we have ecosystem diversity, which addresses on how different fish species or other species do survive in a particular environment. So we have two broader categories of ecosystems, whereby we have aquatic ecosystem, which includes the lakes, rivers, streams, and wetlands. And then we have the terrestrial ecosystem, which simply means land and all life on land. So the characteristics of Africa attributed by good climate received, since most of sub-Saharan part of Africa receive rainfall and ample temperatures throughout the year. These conditions have favored the success of many species, both on land and in the water. And so all our interactions within this video and other videos which soon you will get, we are going to be looking at the interaction of life in the water and life on land, and how they support the livelihood of the resource users. Some of the notable systems of Africa which have facilitated the success of wildlife, we can mention a few of them, such as the tropical rainforests, and these are mainly in equatorial part of Africa, that area where most of the countries where the equator passes. And these tropical rainforests, they receive rainfall throughout the year. They have a good temperature, averagely around 30 to 35 degrees Celsius. So this ample temperature and constant rainfall has facilitated the growth of multiple species within these tropical rainforests. We can talk about the savanna grasslands, which have most of the national parks and game reserves. And these national parks and game reserves have accommodated many wildlife species which are of a good interest in terms of ecotourism. Also, we can talk about the African Great Rift Valleys, which include the two arms, that's the Eastern Rift Valley, which runs from the Red Sea via Lake Turkana around Kenya and goes down to Lake Malawi. Yeah, that's the Eastern Rift Valley arm. Then the Western Rift Valley arm, which starts from Lake Tanganyika in Tanzania and around Malawi, moving up to Uganda, up to Lake Albert in Uganda. So those two arms of Rift Valley system accommodate many features such as faulty lakes, and these lakes have a unique characteristic of being too deep compared to other African lakes, and that's why even the largest or the deepest lake in Africa, Lake Tanganyika, which is the second deepest lake in the world after Lake Baikal in Russia, is also located in Africa. And in my next video, I believe you will see that map. We have included a map of Lake Tanganyika. Yeah, so that, yeah, in the next video, we will show more how these lakes, where they are located. So you will, the next video, don't miss, you will see a nice a map showing how these lakes are, are, are located within Africa. Yeah, so after the Great Rift Valley or the system, yeah, we can also look at mountains such as Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania, Mount Kenya, Mount Rwenzori in Uganda, so, and other mountains in Africa. They have a beautiful scenery which accommodate the wildlife and also contribute towards the ecotourism in Africa. So those are just few of them, but the diversity of Africa in terms of natural resources is inexhaustible, and it's a good place to visit and interact with nature in case you are a natural resource person like me. But having said that, still African natural resources face a great threat whereby they are being deteriorated or undermined somehow, somewhere, and some of the threats which these resources are currently facing include the habitat loss to biodiversity, especially wildlife, and this has been attributed by the increased population because the number of people is increasing, but the natural resources are remaining the same. So meaning there is a lot of pressure exerted on the natural resources, and this has resulted into the displacement of wildlife and even sometimes causing the wildlife human conflict, whereby some areas which used to be the home of wildlife, now it has been encroached by the human settlement. So there is that habitat loss to wildlife, which is a threat to wildlife. Also, we can talk about climate change, yeah, whereby as evidenced by prolonged drought and heavy rainfall, which sometimes even cause the landslides, and all of these have affected the natural system of Africa, hence putting a threat to biodiversity. Also, we can talk about the invasive species, whereby, okay, if I can use one example, we can talk about Iconia craspis, a certain waterweed commonly known as water hyacinth on Lake Victoria. So this species, when it was introduced in the Lake Victoria, it has resulted into a negative effect to fish and other aquatic lives. So that is just one of the few in different systems, which shows that invasive species have hindered the native or endemic species within different ecosystems. Also, we can talk about pollution, and this can be mainly through anthropogenic or human activities, such as improper disposal of industrial waste, whereby if you see the landfills and other areas where garbage is improperly disposed, it affects the biodiversity, either plants or animals. So you see that human activity have caused a negative impact on the biodiversity. So in the next videos, we shall be exhausting more, particularly according to the ecosystems, whereby we shall look at aquatic ecosystem in detail. Then we shall look at terrestrial ecosystem in detail. And please don't miss to subscribe to this channel, comment, and like and forward. Yeah, so it's going to be educative and you will benefit a lot through following this channel. Thanks so much. Let us meet in the next video, where we shall be talking about the aquatic ecosystems or freshwater systems of Africa, whereby we are going to explore more on different fish species in Africa, different lakes. So don't miss. Thanks so much.